The night at Hogwarts had a way of softening the edges of the day. By the time the last embers faded in the great hall's torches, the castle seemed to exhale, settling into quiet comfort. The lanterns along the corridors glowed with their familiar golden haze, gentle orbs floating at just the right height to light the paths of straggling students returning to their common rooms. Beyond the windows, the October sky was still and deep, speckled with stars so sharp and clear they looked as though one could pluck them from the heavens and slip them into a pocket. Hogwarts was no stranger to secrets. Every hallway seemed to hold a memory, every stairwell a mischief, and every painting a story waiting to be told. But tonight, there was something different about the silence in the castle. It wasn't unsettling, but rather curious, like a puzzle humming softly in the background, waiting patiently for discovery. The Gryffindor common room still flickered with the warm light of its fire. Shadows from the dancing flames stretched across the crimson carpets and curled into the corners of the room. The air was heavy with the scent of wood smoke and parchment, mixed faintly with the lingering sweetness of treacle tart got from dinner. A clock on the mantel ticked gently, its steady rhythm like a lullaby against the crackling logs. For Harry, Hermione, and Ron, evenings like this often carried with them a feeling of restlessness. The day's classes, charms with Professor Flitwick, followed by Snape's stern potions lecture, and then the endless rolls of parchment in Transfiguration, had ended, but their minds were too alive to settle completely. Hogwarts had always been more than a school to them. It was an invitation, a labyrinth, an endless unfolding of magic that seemed to whisper, "Look closer." On this particular night, the castle seemed to echo that call a little louder. The trio found themselves sitting together near the hearth, books spread across the low table, but mostly forgotten. Hermione traced absent-minded notes in the margins of her parchment. Ron half-heartedly moved chess pieces with no real intent to play, and Harry watched the firelight flicker across the tall windows, his thoughts drifting to the unseen corners of the castle. And in those corners, the mysteries of Hogwarts stirred gently. A door that had not been opened in centuries seemed to stretch and sigh, as though remembering the feel of footsteps. A window, fogged by the cool autumn night, shimmered faintly as though brushed by invisible fingers. Even the portraits along the grand staircase seemed quieter than usual, their painted eyes glancing toward hidden shadows with unspoken anticipation. There are moments in the castle when time itself seems to bend, when the ancient stones seem to lean forward, listening. This was one of those nights, and though none of the three knew it yet, they were about to stumble upon something impossible, a room that had no name, no place on any map, and no right to exist at all. But for now, the fire was warm, the night was still, and the adventure had yet to begin. Harry sat with his elbows on his knees, the flickering light of the fire painting soft shadows across his glasses. He had long since grown used to the castle's secrets, but there was always a part of him, curious, restless, that longed for the unknown. Even when surrounded by warmth and comfort, his green eyes often wandered toward the darker edges of the room, as though the mysteries of Hogwarts might one day step forward and reveal themselves. There was a quiet maturity about him now, but also the same boyish spark that had first brought him to life within these walls. Beside him, Ron stretched out in one of the armchairs, his legs dangling off the side, a half-played chessboard resting on the table in front of him. The carved pieces looked impatient, twitching slightly as though eager to battle, but Ron's attention wandered. His long fingers tapped lightly on the armrest in rhythm with the ticking clock. He had always been drawn to laughter, to company, but he had grown used to the stillness too, the comfort of knowing he was never alone. His freckled face carried a look of ease, but also the spark of adventure that had led him into so many unexpected places before. Hermione sat cross-legged on the rug, her hair catching the golden light of the flames. Her quill rested in her hand, though she was not truly writing. Instead, she was lost in thought, her mind dancing between the pages of her book and the whispers of something beyond. There was a certain stillness in her expression, the kind that comes when someone knows they are on the edge of discovery. For Hermione, knowledge was never just words on a page. It was a doorway, and every door in Hogwarts was worth opening. The three of them together were like a constellation, separate lights, each shining in their own way, but brightest when joined. Their years of friendship had woven a bond stronger than spells, and it was in these quiet evenings, without danger or noise, that their closeness was most clear. Harry's thoughtful silences, Ron's easy warmth, and Hermione's sharp curiosity blended seamlessly, filling the common room with a comfort deeper than the fire's glow. Outside the tower, the castle seemed to hold its breath. Portraits whispered in muted tones, staircases shifted with unusual patience, and somewhere in the great shadowed halls, a draught carried the scent of stone and secrets. None of them noticed, not yet. For them, it was simply another evening, but Hogwarts had always known when its chosen students were ready for something new. As the fire crackled and the stars beyond the windows shimmered, it seemed inevitable that the night would not remain ordinary. Harry's restless gaze, Ron's quiet tapping, and Hermione's poised quill were small signs of anticipation, threads that would soon be pulled into something larger. And when the moment came, it would be these three, forever bound by courage and curiosity, who would step into the mystery waiting just beyond the known. The castle was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that felt alive. Shadows drifted across the corridors, softened by the glow of lanterns that swayed gently as if stirred by invisible hands. It was past curfew, though that never seemed to matter much anymore. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had slipped out of the Gryffindor common room after the fire had burned low, their footsteps hushed against the stone floor. Harry led the way, wand tip glowing faintly with lumos. The light was soft, not harsh, spilling like liquid gold over the walls, catching dust motes that danced as if bewitched. He didn't say much, but his green eyes carried that same flicker of curiosity Hermione knew well, the one that meant he was chasing something, even if he didn't yet know what. Ron, on the other hand, muttered as he walked, his voice a low grumble that carried no real irritation. "We're daft, aren't we? Walking around after hours when we could be warm and asleep." Nothing good ever comes of wandering the halls this late, yet he stayed close behind, his lanky frame filling the corridor, his loyalty louder than his complaints. Hermione, as usual, had her reasons. She clutched a small leather-bound notebook, a piece of parchment tucked between its pages. "It's not wandering," she whispered firmly, her voice edged with determination. "I found a reference in Hogwarts, a history, a passing mention of a room lost to time, sealed behind spells even the founders themselves may have cast. It's not in the usual maps or records. If there's truth in it, we may be the first in centuries to find it." Harry's curiosity deepened at her words, while Ron groaned softly. But neither of them argued further. They had long since learned that when Hermione's voice carried that particular note of certainty, it was better to follow than to resist. The castle seemed to respond to their presence. The torches along the walls flickered in unusual rhythms, as though acknowledging their path. Portraits stirred in their frames, though many pretended to remain asleep, peeking through half-closed eyes as the trio passed. The stairs, often mischievous, held steady for them, carrying them downward toward the quieter parts of the castle, as though guiding them. It was as they neared the long, empty corridor by the old tapestry of Barnabas, the barmy attempting ballet, that something strange occurred. Hermione stopped suddenly, lifting her quill to the parchment, brows furrowed. She whispered almost to herself, "It should be near here. Something feels different." Harry turned in a slow circle, his wand light sweeping across the bare walls. Nothing unusual at first glance, just stone, cold and ancient, worn smooth by countless years. But then the air shifted. It was subtle, like the faint hum one feels before a storm, or the resonance of a distant bell. It vibrated softly in their bones, a sound without sound, a presence without form. "Did you feel that?" Harry murmured. Ron rubbed his arms and muttered, "Yeah, like the place just sighed." Hermione pressed closer to the wall opposite the tapestry, running her fingertips lightly over the surface. The stone felt cool, but beneath that, something pulsed, like the heartbeat of the castle itself. She caught her breath. "It's here," she whispered. "I know it." Before they could question further, Harry's wand light flickered. Just for a moment, it dimmed as though smothered by a shadow. In that instant, the wall rippled. The smooth surface seemed to bend inward, like fabric caught in a breeze before settling once again into solid stone. Ron took a step back, eyes wide. "Tell me you both saw that." "I did," Harry said softly, his voice calm but steady. "It wasn't in my head." Hermione nodded, excitement brightening her eyes. She traced the stone again, this time whispering a spell. Revelio. The air around the wall shimmered faintly, lines of silver tracing patterns invisible before. Shapes emerged, runes layered upon one another, weaving into a tapestry of enchantments older than anything they had studied in class. "It's protected," Hermione breathed, her voice filled with awe. "Layer upon layer of wards, ancient magic. It's no wonder no one's found it before." Harry stepped closer, his hand hovering over the glowing runes. They pulsed faintly in response, as if recognizing something in him. A warmth spread from the wall, Not threatening, but inviting, almost curious, Ron peered over his shoulder, unease creeping into his voice. Feels dodgy to me. Walls aren't supposed to breathe, Harry, but Harry didn't pull back. He felt a strange familiarity in the pulse of the magic, like an echo of something long forgotten, yet deeply connected to the castle itself. Carefully, he pressed his palm against the stone. The effect was immediate. The runes flared to life, not with harsh brilliance, but with a soft glow, like moonlight spilling across the floor. The wall to trembled gently, and then, as if it had been waiting centuries for the right touch, a seam appeared. The stone split soundlessly down the middle, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. Hermione gasped, her notebook clutched tight. "We found it," she whispered, almost reverent. Ron shook his head, but stepped closer nonetheless, peering into the gap. "Brilliant. We've just opened a hole into who knows where in the middle of the night. Nothing unsettling about that at all." But Harry was already leaning forward, the gentle pull of the unknown impossible to resist. The darkness within was not an empty. It shimmered faintly, like a veil of mist lit from behind. And beneath that shimmer came the faintest of sounds. Not threatening, not harsh. It was more like a lullaby carried on the wind, soft and distant, as though the room beyond was singing them a welcome. The three of them stood together, balanced on the edge of discovery. Hermione spoke first, her voice trembling not with fear, but with wonder. "This is it. The room that shouldn't exist. The founders must have hidden it for a reason." Harry nodded, the firelight from his wand casting a soft halo around them. "Then maybe it's time we find out why." Ron sighed, shaking his head, though his lips twitched with reluctant amusement. "Every time we follow you two, it ends in something mad. But, all right, let's see what's inside." And with that, the seam widened, the stone folding gracefully aside. A doorway yawned open where there had been none, breathing out a gust of air cool and scented faintly of old parchment and rain-soaked earth. The misty shimmer parted, revealing only darkness beyond, but a darkness that beckoned rather than threatened. Together, with Harry's wand light guiding them, the trio stepped forward. The stones sealed silently behind them, and the corridor was left as though untouched, the tapestry swaying gently as if nothing at all had happened. Inside, the air was thick with enchantment, the walls whispering faintly in languages they could not understand. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if bouncing from unseen corners, and the sense of stepping into a place outside time itself filled them with a quiet, steady awe. For the first time that night, none of them spoke. The discovery itself was louder than any words. The first steps into the hidden chamber felt like crossing into another dream. The trio walked slowly, their eyes adjusting to the dim glow that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. The stone beneath their feet was smoother than the rest of the castle, worn down by footsteps long vanished. The air itself hummed, carrying with it the faint, soothing scent of ancient wood and parchment, as if the room had preserved its own memory of time. Hermione's gaze darted across the walls. Strange carvings spiraled upward, patterns that were both familiar and unfamiliar, symbols of old magic woven together like threads of a tapestry. She reached out to touch them, her fingers tracing the edges of one symbol glowing faintly, almost alive beneath her hand. "This magic is older than the castle itself," she whispered, her voice hushed with awe. "It's as if the room has been waiting, listening." Harry held his wand higher, letting the gentle light spill further into the darkness. Slowly, the room stretched forward, far deeper than they had expected. Bookshelves lined the walls, but not in the orderly style of the library. These shelves seemed to grow out of the stone itself, crooked and uneven, holding tomes so old their covers looked like they had been carved rather than bound. Some glowed faintly, others murmured in whispers that carried no distinct words, but lulled the mind into quiet curiosity. Ron's footsteps faltered as he approached a table at the center of the room. "Oi, have a look at this." On the table sat a chessboard. Its pieces were frozen mid-game, ancient and dust-covered, yet somehow poised with energy. The figures twitched slightly as Ron leaned closer, their stone arms gripping weapons and shields, ready to spring into motion. Ron frowned, scratching his head. "Doesn't it look familiar?" Harry joined him, tilting his head. The layout mirrored the chessboard they had played on during their first year, the enchanted game that had nearly cost Ron his life, yet had led them toward the Philosopher's Stone. But this one was older, carved from obsidian and ivory, glowing faintly, as though infused with a deeper enchantment. "It's not just familiar," Harry said softly. "It's the same game, the same moment frozen in time." Before they could question further, the pieces stirred. With a sharp scrape, one of the pawns shifted forward, though no hand had moved it. The board shivered, glowing faintly, and then the room itself shifted. The walls stretched, folding into shadows, until the trio found themselves no longer standing in a hidden vault, but upon a vast stone floor surrounded by towering pillars. The chessboard had grown, its pieces now life-sized and looming, their eyes glowing like embers. Ron stumbled back, his voice cracking in disbelief. "Not again, please, not again." But Hermione, though startled, steadied herself. "It's not attacking us. Look, the pieces aren't advancing. It's waiting." And indeed, the massive figures stood motionless, their glowing eyes fixed upon the trio. The air was still, but thick with anticipation. Harry stepped forward cautiously, his wand light dimming in the strange glow of the chamber. "It's asking us to play." The words hung in the silence, and with them came a quiet shift in the air. The enchanted chessboard pulsed faintly, acknowledging his voice as though it had been waiting centuries for someone to understand. Ron groaned. "I don't fancy another bruising, thanks very much. Last time nearly flattened me." But Hermione's eyes gleamed with realization. "This isn't the same as before. Look, the runes along the edge." She pointed to glowing inscriptions now circling the great board, etched into the stone floor. "These are protective wards. This game isn't meant to harm. It's a test, a puzzle of strategy, perhaps even a key to unlocking something further within this room." Harry's chest tightened, though not with fear. The steady thrum of the room felt almost like encouragement, as though Hogwarts itself wanted them here. Ron sighed and stepped reluctantly closer, his freckled face pale. Of course it's a test, because everything in this castle is a test. Still, his eyes sharpened, a flicker of old determination returning. Chess had always been his strength, and despite the unease, he could not resist the pull of the game. The trio exchanged a glance, silent agreement passing between them. They would play. Hermione knelt briefly, placing her palm on the glowing runes. She muttered softly, "Protego." A faint shimmer spread around the three of them, forming a protective bubble, fragile but present. "Just in case," she murmured. The board stirred, its massive pieces shifting into formation. The sound was deep, resonant, like stone grinding against stone. A knight's horse pawed at the ground, its fiery eyes sparking, while rooks loomed like towers ready to fall. Ron took a deep breath and stepped forward. "All right then. Let's play." He moved first, guiding a pawn ahead. Instantly, the opposing side responded, a pawn sliding forward with a weighty thud. The floor trembled faintly with each move, but the bubble of protection held firm. As the game unfolded, Harry and Hermione watched closely. Each move sent whispers through the chamber, as though the room itself approved or disapproved. The air thickened with quiet suspense, but not dread, more like the hush of an audience watching a play. Ron played with a focus Harry rarely saw outside of battle. His eyes narrowed, his hand steady, his mind sharp. The pieces obeyed him, moving smoothly as though recognizing his command. Yet this was no ordinary game. Each move seemed to shift the chamber subtly. Shadows bent, runes glowed brighter, and faint images flickered in the air. Memories of their first-year trial, echoes of their younger selves standing where they now stood. At one point, a memory image of a younger Ron appeared faintly on the board, climbing onto a knight's back, his voice echoing, "That's chess," before fading into mist. The vision left Ron pale, his hand trembling, though he pushed forward. "This room is tied to us," Hermione whispered. "It remembers." Harry nodded slowly, his heart steady. "And it wants us to remember too." The game pressed on, each move bringing them closer to resolution. Finally, after what felt like hours, yet no more than minutes, Ron cornered the opposing king. The stone figure bowed deeply, lowering its weapon in surrender before crumbling into harmless dust. The board dissolved in a shimmer of light, and the vast chamber folded back into itself. The trio stood once again in the hidden vault, the chessboard on the table, now cracked and faded, its magic spent. But in its place, something new had appeared. At the far end of the room, the shelves had shifted. A narrow passage revealed itself, lined with soft, glowing light. The runes along the walls pulsed faintly, as though rewarding them. The air beyond the passage smelled of rain and fresh parchment, of something waiting to be discovered. Hermione's eyes shone. The game was a gateway, and we've unlocked the path forward. Ron sank into a nearby chair, rubbing his temples with a groan. Brilliant. Next time, could it be a game of exploding snap instead? Harry chuckled softly, but his gaze lingered on the glowing passage. Whatever lay ahead was calling them now, pulling them deeper into the mystery. The enchanted chessboard had tested their bond, their memory, and their trust. What awaited them next, they could only imagine. For now, though they had passed the first trial of the room that shouldn't exist, and the castle, in its own quiet way, seemed to sigh in approval. The air in the newly revealed passage was cooler, carrying the faint tang of damp stone and something more elusive, like forgotten parchment and the distant trace of candle smoke long since extinguished. Harry's wand light glowed steadily, its warmth casting soft halos along the walls etched with runes that pulsed faintly, as though keeping time with their footsteps. Each step they took seemed to echo further than the last, stretching into corners unseen, giving the impression that the passage was alive, listening to them. Ron walked just behind Harry, his long strides uneven as he muttered under his breath, "I don't like it when the castle starts moving on its own. Stairs are bad enough, but secret rooms that appear out of nowhere? It's like the place is always one step ahead, yet even his words carried no true bite, just the familiar blend of unease and loyalty that made him follow nonetheless. Hermione, however, was alight with curiosity. She held her notebook close, scribbling quickly whenever they paused. Her quill whispered over parchment, capturing every detail, the sequence of runes, the shimmer of the air, even the subtle way the stone floor sloped downward. "This could be older than the founders themselves," she murmured. "If it's tied to the castle's deepest enchantments, then every spell we know might only scratch the surface of what Hogwarts remembers." Her words hung in the air, and Harry found himself glancing at the walls as if they might answer her. In truth, there was something about the place that felt less like discovery and more like remembrance, as though they were stepping not into something new, but into something the castle was showing them deliberately, like a secret it had kept until it decided they were ready. The passage widened into a small chamber, its ceiling arched and glittering faintly with veins of silver that caught their wand light and fractured it into streams. The floor was patterned with circles, concentric rings carved into the stone, each etched with runes. They glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Ron stopped short, his freckled face pale. "I don't like the look of that. It feels like standing in the middle of a watchful eye." But Hermione stepped closer, kneeling to examine the runes. "It's a warding circle. Not dangerous, not exactly, more like a guardian. The castle is showing us its defenses, or perhaps testing if we understand them." Harry watched her fingers trace the symbols. They shifted subtly beneath her touch, not crumbling or breaking, but adjusting, aligning with her recognition. It was as if the runes were listening to her, measuring her knowledge. When she whispered, "Alohomora," the smallest circle dimmed and faded, sliding inward to reveal a path leading further still. The floor shifted smoothly, like stone flowing into water, without sound or resistance. The three of them exchanged glances. The moment felt heavy, but not threatening, like the slow turning of a great key. They pressed on. The next corridor was narrower, lined with shelves carved from the very rock. Upon them rested objects sealed in glass-like cases. Some were cracked and weathered, others pristine. Harry paused before one, brushing away a film of dust to reveal what looked like a wand, snapped in two yet humming faintly with energy. Ron leaned close, his eyes wide. Why would anyone keep a broken wand down here? Hermione's voice softened, awed. Because it isn't broken, it's unfinished. Look, the core is exposed, but still alive. This could be one of Ollivander's earliest attempts, or perhaps even something older, a prototype that never should have been used. The air seemed to hum at her words, as though the vault itself approved of her recognition. Harry felt the faintest pull in his chest, like the castle wanted him to know that what they were seeing was part of its memory, not just forgotten relics, but pieces of stories untold. They moved slowly, reverently. Each shelf held another puzzle, an hourglass with sand that flowed upward instead of down, a key that dissolved into mist whenever touched, a shard of mirror that reflected not their faces, but the ceiling of a star-filled sky. Each object whispered of history too deep to name, each holding its own quiet story. Ron, though uneasy, couldn't help but be drawn in. He lingered at the mirror shard, watching the stars shift faintly in its surface. "It's showing me constellations," he murmured, surprised by the wonder in his own voice. "The same ones Dad taught me when I was a kid. Only, they're moving." Hermione recorded everything feverishly, while Harry simply walked, letting the weight of the place seep into him. It was like wandering into the very soul of Hogwarts. At last, the corridor opened into a vast hall. It was circular, domed high above, the ceiling painted with frescoes so faded they looked like ghosts of images rather than pictures. Still, Harry could just make out figures, wizards in flowing robes, casting spells that twined together like threads of gold, their faces blurred as though not meant to be remembered too clearly. In the center of the hall stood a pedestal. Upon it lay a book, closed, its cover darkened with age but shimmering faintly with protective wards. The trio stopped at the edge of the hall. Hermione's breath caught. This is it." The heart of the vault. Ron rubbed the back of his neck uneasily. "And you're sure it's not cursed?" "Because it looks cursed." Harry didn't move immediately. He felt the air pressing gently against his skin, as if the hall itself were breathing with them, waiting. He remembered moments like this before, when the castle revealed something hidden, when it guided him toward truths he wasn't sure he wanted. And yet, there was no menace here, just a quiet urging, an invitation. Hermione stepped forward, but the floor pulsed faintly beneath her feet. She froze, then carefully stepped back. "It doesn't want me," she whispered, wonder in her tone. Her eyes shifted toward Harry. "It wants you." The weight of her words hung heavy in the vast chamber. Harry swallowed, stepping slowly toward the pedestal. Each step echoed, not loudly but deeply, resonating like the sound of a bell. The wards shimmered faintly, but instead of repelling him, they parted at his approach, like mist stirred by wind. He reached out, his fingers brushing the ancient cover. The book trembled softly, a hum rising from it like a sigh of release. Dust lifted into the air, glowing faintly, before dissolving into light. The cover did not open yet. Instead, the frescoes above brightened, their golden threads weaving together into clearer forms. The blurred faces of the ancient wizards sharpened slightly, revealing eyes that glowed with recognition. They looked down upon Harry, not with menace, not even with expectation, but with something gentler. Approval, perhaps, or acknowledgement. The book pulsed beneath his hand, and he felt warmth spread through his fingertips, flowing into his chest, steady and calm. The hall did not erupt in danger or alarm. Instead, it grew quieter still, the silence pressing deeper, until it felt like they were standing at the threshold of something both immense and profoundly peaceful. Ron whispered hoarsely, "Blimey. What's it doing?" Hermione's eyes glistened. "It's choosing." Harry stood in stillness, his hand resting upon the forgotten book, the wards melting away like snow. The vault was showing them the next layer of its secret, and the gentle suspense in the air told them this was only the beginning of what was hidden here. For now, they did not open the book. They simply stood, bathed in the hush of history awakening around them, hearts beating softly in rhythm with the vault itself. The mystery deepened, not with fear, but with wonder. The hush within the vault lingered after Harry's hand brushed the book, as though the entire chamber had taken a deep breath and then held it, waiting. The light from their wands stretched across the carved walls, highlighting shelves upon shelves of strange objects and forgotten artifacts, each whispering a quiet story of its own. Harry let his fingers rest a moment longer on the cover of the ancient book before drawing back. His hand tingled faintly, but no harm came. Instead, he felt something akin to reassurance, like the soft pressure of a hand on his shoulder. The message was clear. The vault had revealed enough for now. The rest would come in time. The three friends stepped slowly away from the pedestal, their footsteps muffled against the patterned floor. It was Hermione who broke the silence, her voice soft yet alive with thought. "We need to decide what to do next," she said. "This place is offering us choices. It isn't forcing anything. That means it wants us to consider." Carefully, Ron gave a low groan, though his eyes never left the shelves. "That sounds like exams all over again. Only this time, instead of essays, we've got mysterious glowing runes and cursed-looking relics." Harry gave a quiet laugh, and the sound seemed to ease the tension that had been gathering. Still, he nodded toward the artifacts resting in the walls. "Maybe the vault is asking us to learn something, to explore, to notice." And so they did. They wandered among the shelves, moving slowly, their wands casting gentle halos across the cases. Each object seemed to hum alive in the light. A golden quill that wrote on its own, its feathers shifting gently even with no hand to guide it. A deck of cards bound with silver thread, the top card glowing faintly as though it were trying to reveal itself. An orb filled with mist, swirling in slow circles that suggested a sky within, clouds forming and dissolving with unhurried grace. Ron stopped at the cards, tilting his head. "Looks like something Fred and George would have loved," he murmured. "I bet if I touch one, it'll blow up in my face." Yet he lingered, curiosity etched across his freckled features. Hermione, meanwhile, was entranced by the orb. She pressed closer, watching the shifting clouds as though they might part to reveal a message. "This is a weather orb," she whispered. "I've read about them, but they were thought lost centuries ago. They could predict storms weeks ahead." Her voice softened further, filled with reverence. "Imagine how many lives this might have saved, tucked away down here, forgotten." Her words carried no accusation, only wonder. Harry, however, was drawn back toward the frescoes high above. The painted figures, though faded, seemed clearer now, their golden threads more defined than before. It was as though his touch on the book had woken them. They did not move, but their stillness held purpose. Watching, waiting, they reconvened near the center of the hall, each carrying their own impressions of what they had seen. "It's almost like the vault is asking us to choose where to focus," Hermione said, tucking her quill behind her ear. "The book, the artifacts, the frescoes, each could tell us something, but we can't divide our attention everywhere at once." Ron sighed, rubbing his arms as though the chill of the vault had settled deep. "And what if we pick the wrong one? I'm not keen on waking up some ancient curse just because we were nosy." Hermione gave him a patient look. "It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like a test of wisdom." Harry, quiet until then, finally spoke. "Maybe it isn't about right or wrong. Maybe it's about what we bring to it, about trust, ours and the castle's." That thought seemed to settle between them, as steady as the pulse of the glowing runes in the floor. At length, they decided to each spend more time with one element, trusting that their combined understanding would form a whole. Hermione would study the orb, drawn by its potential for knowledge. Ron, half reluctant but unwilling to leave it behind, would watch the deck of cards. And Harry would remain near the book, sensing that his bond with it was not yet complete. As they spread out, the vault seemed to brighten slightly, as though approving their decision. Hermione sat cross-legged before the orb, her wand light casting long shadows across her notes. The clouds within the sphere responded faintly to her murmurs, parting and swirling when she spoke theories aloud, almost as though listening. She smiled softly, soothed by the thought that even forgotten magic yearned to be understood. Ron, meanwhile, crouched beside the cards, muttering about bad ideas, but staying nonetheless. When he reached out and tapped the top card, it did not explode. Instead, it turned itself over, revealing an image of a knight in armor, his sword lowered in peace. The silver thread shimmered faintly, but no harm came. Ron let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "All right," he whispered, more to himself than to the others. "Maybe you're not so bad." Harry sat upon the steps leading to the pedestal, gazing up at the frescoes. The painted wizards seemed to glow more warmly now, their blurred features softening into shapes almost familiar. He could not name them, but he felt no need to. Their presence was enough, a reminder that he was not alone in this place, that Hogwarts itself was with him. Time passed gently in the vault. There was no rush, no urgency, only quiet exploration. The castle seemed to cradle them, allowing them to make choices not in haste, but in thoughtfulness. Eventually, they regrouped once more. Hermione's notes brimmed with new insights. Ron looked more at ease, and Harry's calm had deepened into quiet certainty. Hermione closed her notebook with care. "We've each seen something different," she said softly, "and yet, it all feels connected. The vault is guiding us, not to answers, but to understanding, to patience, to trust." Ron shrugged, but there was no bite in it. "I don't know about all that, but I do know it hasn't blown us up yet, and I suppose that counts for something." Harry smiled faintly. "It's showing us that some doors don't need to be forced open. Some reveal themselves when the time is right." The three of them sat together in the center of the hall, their wands resting nearby, their shoulders brushing lightly as the hush of the vault wrapped around them like a blanket. They had made their choices, and in doing so, had passed the vault's quiet test, not of strength or bravery, but of patience, unity, and gentle curiosity. And though the mysteries remained, they no longer felt daunting. Instead, they felt like companions, waiting with them in the silence, part of a story still unfolding. The vault seemed to breathe with them as they sat together in the circle of their wand light, their shoulders brushing, their hearts calm. For a long while, no one spoke. There was no need to. The silence here was not empty, but full, brimming with a presence that pressed gently against their awareness like a tide waiting to rise. Then, very softly, the runes beneath their feet began to shift. The glowing lines rearranged themselves, sliding across the stone as though guided by invisible hands. Harry, Ron, and Hermione leaned closer, not in alarm, but in quiet awe. The pattern that formed was unmistakably deliberate, a circle enclosing three smaller shapes, each distinct, yet connected by fine threads of light. Hermione's breath caught. "It's us," she whispered. Her finger hovered just above the glowing symbols. "Three parts, tied together, the vault recognizes us." Harry's chest tightened at her words. He felt the truth in them as surely as he felt the warmth of the light. Ron frowned, though not with doubt. "So, what? The vault likes us? Why would it care who we are?" Before Hermione could reply, the frescoes above stirred. For the first time, the painted figures moved, ever so slightly, their golden threads shimmering as though tugged by unseen currents. The three wizards, their faces blurred but their forms radiant, extended their hands outward. From each, a narrow ribbon of golden light descended toward the trio. The light was soft, warm, almost like sunlight filtered through leaves. The threads touched them, Harry on the crown of his head, Hermione on her heart, Ron on his hand. None of them flinched. Instead, the light seeped gently into them, not with force, but with a kind of trust, as though offering rather than imposing. Harry closed his eyes, and in that golden stillness, he felt a memory not his own. A great hall, much older than the one he knew, filled with wizards and witches who spoke of dreams rather than fears. He sensed the early days of Hogwarts, when the castle's magic was raw and full of possibility. He saw not the founders themselves, but those who came after, guardians of the unseen places. They whispered a vow. Some rooms will not be found until they are needed, and by those who will honor them. Hermione's vision was different. She felt the weight of knowledge, of books written and sealed, not to hide, but to wait. She glimpsed quills that wrote only when the world was ready, potions brewed for times not yet come. The vault was not merely a storehouse. It was a promise, a memory of the castle's intent to keep safe what might otherwise be lost. Ron's vision was simpler, but no less powerful. He felt hands clasping his own, dozens of them, rough and warm, as though generations had reached across time to say, "You are not alone in this." For him, it was less about wisdom and more about belonging, about being seen not for cleverness or bravery alone, but simply for being part of something greater. When the light faded, they opened their eyes together. None spoke immediately, each still carrying the resonance of what they had glimpsed. Finally, Hermione whispered, "The vault isn't meant for everyone. It's meant for those who come together, who balance one another." She glanced at the glowing runes, at the circle tying 3 parts into a whole. "That's why it opened for us." Harry nodded slowly. "It's not about power or skill or even courage. It's about trust." Ron shifted uncomfortably, but his voice was steady. "So what do we do now? We've seen all this, felt all this. Do we just leave?" The vault itself seemed to answer. The pedestal holding the book glowed again, brighter this time. The cover lifted gently, as though inviting Harry to look once more. He stepped forward, Hermione and Ron at his side, and when he laid his hand upon it, the pages opened without resistance. The script within was ancient, curling letters, illuminated by delicate strokes of gold. Yet when Harry's eyes fell upon the words, they reshaped themselves, flowing into English. "To those who find this place, know that the castle has chosen you. You are its stewards, not of stone and tower, but of memory. What you learn here, keep with care. What you share, do so only with hearts you trust. The vault endures because you endure, and in you, its story lives." The message was brief, but it resonated more deeply than any long speech could. It was not a command, nor a prophecy, but a gift of trust. Hermione's eyes glistened, though her voice remained calm. "It's like Hogwarts itself is speaking to us, reminding us that knowledge isn't only for power, it's for protection, for connection." Ron scratched his head, but there was no jest in his tone this time. "So we don't take anything. We don't force anything. We just carry it with us?" Harry smiled faintly. "I think that's enough, maybe more than enough." They stood there together, reading the glowing words once more before the book slowly closed. The pedestal dimmed, the runes settled back into stillness, and the frescoes above resumed their frozen forms. Yet the sense of presence, of companionship, did not fade. It remained within them, a quiet light they could carry beyond the vault. The revelation was not loud or dramatic. There were no bursts of magic, no sudden upheavals. Instead, it was gentle, like the soft closing of a door after a long day, or the settling of a blanket across one's shoulders. The vault had shown them not treasures to wield, but truths to remember, that together They could be trusted with even the deepest mysteries. They lingered in the hush, reluctant to break the spell of the moment. Then, slowly, Harry turned to his friends. "Shall we go?" Hermione nodded, tucking her notes away with unusual tenderness, as though they were more than parchment. Ron gave the cards a last look, muttering, "No hard feelings," before straightening. As they made their way back toward the arched doorway, the golden glow that had guided them earlier appeared once more, lighting their path with gentle steadiness. And though they would leave the vault behind, the insight they had found would walk with them always, quiet and enduring, like a secret kept not by walls, but by hearts. The golden light that had lingered around the trio seemed to soften as they stepped back toward the doorway. The glow followed them for a few steps, as though reluctant to let them go, before gradually dimming into the quiet folds of the chamber. Harry, Hermione, and Ron turned once more to take in the sight of the vault. It stood calm and still, no longer shifting or glowing, as if it had returned to sleep. Yet, they knew it was not empty. It had shared its secret with them, and that was enough. For a long moment, they simply stood together in the archway. Hermione adjusted her robes, smoothing them with a thoughtful air. Ron stretched his arms, muttering softly, "Well, that was something, wasn't it?" Harry gave him a small smile, but his gaze lingered on the room. The frescoes no longer moved, the pedestal no longer glowed, but deep down, he sensed the chamber was still alive. Quietly, patiently alive. With a gentle pull, they stepped into the corridor. The doorway shimmered faintly behind them, then folded into stone, as though it had never been there at all. Only the memory of golden light remained, wrapped softly around their hearts. The walk back through the castle felt slower than usual, though not because they were tired. Each footstep echoed calmly against the stone floor, accompanied by the low hum of Hogwarts at rest. Torches flickered along the walls, casting a warm glow that painted everything in shades of amber. The night was quiet, as though the castle itself was giving them space to carry the weight of what they had seen. Ron was the first to break the silence, his voice subdued. "Strange, isn't it? We went down there thinking we'd find danger or secrets, and instead, it feels like we've been trusted." Hermione's nod was small but firm. "Yes, and that kind of trust is rarer than treasure." Harry didn't say anything right away. He simply let their words linger as his thoughts drifted back to the golden threads, the visions, the message in the book. He felt a calmness inside him, like the still waters of the Black Lake under moonlight. Whatever the vault had been, it wasn't about fear or control. It was about reminding them of something they already carried, the power of being together. As they turned down another hallway, they noticed the portraits on the walls were unusually quiet. Many of the painted figures seemed to be asleep, their heads bowed in dreams. A few, however, watched the trio pass with gentle smiles, as if they too knew where the three had been. Hermione caught one portrait's gaze and gave a small nod. The figure winked at her, then closed his eyes again, returning to his painted rest. When they reached the staircases, the familiar shifting steps moved with surprising ease. Not once did the stairs lead them astray. It was as though the castle itself had decided to guide them gently back without any of its usual mischief. Ron chuckled quietly. For once, they're being polite. Hermione only smiled faintly in reply. The Gryffindor common room was nearly empty when they slipped inside. A few embers glowed in the fireplace, casting a soft red light over the armchairs. The room smelled faintly of ash and lavender polish, familiar and welcoming. The trio moved toward their usual seats, letting themselves sink into the cushions. No one rushed to speak. The warmth of the fire filled the silence, accompanied by the occasional crackle of wood. Harry leaned to speak, his eyes half closed, the calm of the vault still lingering. Hermione rested her hands on her knees, gazing into the flames as though seeing golden threads among them. Ron stretched out, sighing in quiet contentment. Finally, Hermione whispered, "We can't tell anyone, can we?" Her voice wasn't troubled, only thoughtful. Harry shook his head slowly. "No, it was meant for us, I think. And some things are meant to stay between friends." Ron smiled, softer than usual, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Well, I'll take that over a cursed broomstick any day." Their laughter was faint but warm, dissolving quickly into the comfort of the moment. No urgency, no plans to make, no puzzles to solve. Only the memory of golden light and the steady companionship of three friends who knew, without needing to say it, that they had been part of something rare and meaningful. The fire burned lower. The common room grew quieter. Beyond the windows, the stars shimmered above the sleeping grounds of Hogwarts. And somewhere deep below, in a vault that no longer showed its doorway, a secret rested again, safe, silent, and waiting. The trio carried it not as a burden, but as a comfort. The night, with all its mystery and revelation, ended not in unrest, but in peace. And as they finally drifted toward their dormitories, each step felt lighter, as though the castle itself was tucking them gently into bed. The castle had fallen into the quietest hour of night. Even the portraits were still, their painted figures resting in silence. The Gryffindor Tower lay calm and hushed, its ancient stones warmed by the last glow of the embers in the hearth. Harry, Ron, and Hermione each lay in their beds, the events of the evening drifting through their minds like soft wisps of dream. The hidden room no longer pressed upon them with its mystery. Instead, it lingered in memory as a comfort, a secret that had chosen them, not to trouble them, but to remind them of their bond. The golden glow had faded from sight, but it still rested gently in their hearts, like a lamp quietly burning in the background of their thoughts. Harry turned slightly in his bed, the curtains drawn around him. He thought of the doorway sealing itself, of the silent promise they had made to keep its secret safe. It no longer felt heavy. It felt like something precious, entrusted to them as a gift. He closed his eyes, letting the calm wash over him. In the girls' dormitory, Hermione sat for a final moment by the window, the stars gleaming softly above the black lake. She whispered something to herself, a promise of remembrance, and then let the night cradle her into sleep. Her heart was lighter than it had been in weeks, as though the chamber had not only revealed a secret, but lifted a weight she hadn't known she carried. Ron was already asleep, a faint smile on his face, as though even in dreams he was amused by the strangeness of it all. Yet beneath the humor, he too carried the quiet warmth of knowing they had faced something unknown and that they had done it together. The castle breathed around them, steady and protective, its magic as old as time. And in that stillness, everything felt safe. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the deep vaults and quiet halls of Hogwarts, they were not threats but reminders. That wonder still existed, that mystery did not always bring fear, and that friendship was stronger than anything they might uncover. As the night folded softly into dawn, the trio rested without worry. And you, dear listener, may rest too, knowing that in the world of Hogwarts, even the greatest mysteries can end with gentle peace. Sleep now, carried on the quiet magic of the castle, wrapped in the comfort of its timeless embrace.